Hi, and welcome back to our channel, Pay Down Debt Solutions. I'm Jen, and today we are going to focus on loans versus lines and what the difference is. I come to you as an ex-banker and as an ex-branch manager with lots of knowledge about the banking tools, and so I want to get right into it and get right into an explanation of how Velocity Banking can work for you. So when we talk about velocity banking, we talk about loans and lines, and we always say, never a loan, always a line. And I'm going to illustrate for you the reason for that. So if you want to take a look at loans versus line, okay, a loan is where the borrower has access to the funds for only once, okay? And then they pay it back through principal and interest payments monthly until paid in full. So a loan is something that you put money into every month and you can't get that money back out, right? So you make your payments every month and it's on a schedule, and usually it's an amortized schedule. And so once it's on a schedule like that, it is set and there's nothing you can do about that loan until it's paid off unless you're going to put extra payments on it, which some people choose to do, okay? Now, a line of credit is a little bit different. A line of credit is where the borrower receives a set credit limit and makes regular payments that usually include both interest and principal. So unlike a loan, a line of credit allows for repeated access to these funds, okay? So an example of lines of credit are, of course, credit cards. They are personal lines of credit, home equity lines of credit, and also business lines of credit. And also a first lien home equity could be included in that as well, okay? So when we talk about velocity banking, we talk about using lines over a loan. And the reason we do that is because a line of credit gives us an extra power, right? It's magical because it gives us an extra power that a loan doesn't allow us to have, all right? So you have loans where are lines where interest accrues only when the purchase is made for it, okay? Or in other words, when it has a balance. So you can have a home equity line of credit, you can have a credit card, you can have a business line of credit or a first lien home equity sit at zero, right? And if there's no funds that are on that line of credit, then that means you don't owe any interest, okay? So, obvious. Now, the other thing about the lines of credit is this. Some of them are interest only. So you can make just interest-only payments, and a lot of the home equities are set up this way, where you can just pay the interest on whatever the balance is. And of course, if you do that, you're not going to actually pay it down, but it gives you some flexibility there. And it's that flexibility that makes velocity banking work for us, right? And of course, we're not going to sit there and make an interest-only payment because that wouldn't make sense, especially when I'm talking about getting you guys out of debt, right? So we want to get out of debt. We don't want to sit in debt. And so that's where we're going to learn how to use these tools the way that they should be used versus the way that they are being used, okay? So quit stressing. I know you guys are sitting out there. A lot of you are stressed out. You can't sleep at night. You can't eat because you are so consumed with the debts that you have and how you're going to make this work. And you feel like you're making payments and you're going to make these payments for the rest of your life and you're never going to have any cash flow and you're never going to be able to enjoy yourself. Well, that isn't necessarily true because I'm going to show you a better way. All right. Okay, so when we talk about loans, right, there's different kinds of loans. There's secured lines and loans, and there's unsecured lines and loans. And so a secured loan or line of credit, these are backed by collateral. Okay, so some of that collateral might be your home, it could be your car, right? It could be investments, and maybe it's cash. Like some of them, like these lines of credit and these loans that you can put money in a CD, let's say, and you tie it up and you basically give it to the bank as collateral, okay? So those are secured loans. Also, there's something called a secured credit card. And a lot of times people will use secured credit cards to help them, get credit, right? To help them build their credit or fix and repair their credit. So that's something that you can look into too if you do not have access to a line of credit. Sometimes, starting off with a secured credit card will be the way that you can get yourself a credit card that is, not secured and allows you a little bit more flexibility, okay? So an example like that, so a secured credit card, you actually have to put money up, right? So you'd have to fund, like $500 or whatever. And then you would, use that card until the 500 is gone. And then you'd have to secure another 500 for it. So each time you'd have to do that. Okay. So that is one way that you can help repair credit. So I wanted to mention that. Now, you've got unsecured loans and lines. Okay. So unsecured loans and lines are usually referred to as quote unquote personal. Okay. So they're personal loans or lines, and they're also like the handshake. When you used to talk about loans in the good old day, they would talk about, doing something on a handshake. Well, these were loans and lines on a handshake where they're backed by you as the person and nothing else. There's no collateral for them. All right. So it's basically, a handshake or a promise to pay. So let's look at a pictorial view here of how like loans and lines are different, right? So if we want to take and look at an illustration, and of course, you all know that I'm a very pictorial learner, so I like to use illustrations when I can. So here's our loan, right? So we have our money. So this is our money that's coming into our loan. So here's our loan. And I'm showing here that this loan is a $600 payment, okay? So we've got payment, payment, payment. These are all $600 payments that have been made. And these are still outstanding payments where the $600 has yet to be paid, okay? And it's amortized and it's on a schedule. So here you can see my pot, right? So here's my pot with a lid on it. So what it shows here is that there's money inside this pot, but it's locked. You can't get the money out, right? You can't reach your hand in there and pull it out. So can you come in and get money? Nope, we've got a big red X there. You can't. So once you put your car payment in, or your whatever payment that you're making, your boat payment, your RV payment, whatever it is, once that payment goes in, it's gone. You can't access that anymore. So that money is gone and of no use to you at that point, okay? Now, line of credit, a little bit different here, right? So here's our money, right? It's coming into our line. And from the line, you've got your payments here. Your payments are made, your payments are made, your payments are made. And I'm showing that most of the time it's interest in principal, just like the loan up here is interest in principal, but we know that the interest is much more in the very beginning of that loan and then much less as the loan goes on, right? And the principal payment that you're making is much less in the beginning and much more towards the end of the loan, okay? Now, line of credit, for all intents and purposes, are, as equal as they can be, right? So you're going to have an interest rate, and that interest rate is can be, so you can pay just interest on some of these lines of credit. So depending on how you have that line set up, so some personal lines of credit and some home equity lines of credit, you can just pay interest only, all right? And so that interest only payment then is helpful for us in a lot of ways because we don't pay quite as much, and then we can borrow the funds and then, put money back in as need be. Depends on what the purpose is for, right? So it really depends on what you're using the line of credit for. So you can see $600 payment here, $600 payment here. This payment is outstanding still. So we put our $600 payment in the pot. And as you can see, the pot has an open lid, right? It's open. And so if red light, yellow light, green light, right? That's my version of a stoplight, although I didn't have yellow, so I had to use orange, so sorry about that. Anyway, so like red, yellow, green, right? It's always green. So basically you can always use that line of credit so long as there is funds available for you to use, right? So if it's not at its limit, then you can always use that line and take out money as need be, all right? So here I'm showing you get the arrow, you can, reach your hand in, take your money, right? Okay, so if a $600 payment is made, I can take $600 back out the next day. Or let me specify, as long as that payment has been registered that it has been made, you can then pull money out of it. So this is, sometimes a really great savior for people who have lost their job, right? So let's say you've lost your job, or for some reason you can't go to work, you're injured, you don't have any kind of insurance that, pays you, all right? So if you have the kind of job where you have to be there in order to get paid, sometimes lines of credit can be really helpful, because if you lose your job for a few months or you can't go to work, right? You can go in, pull money out enough to cover the things you have to cover, like your mortgage, your car payment, your bills, whatever, right? So you can take that money out and then you can make your payment back in. So you basically take all the bills out, money for your bills out, plus the payment amount for that line, and then you can make a payment back to the line of credit. And you can do that, right? You can put money back and forth like that. So you can do it back and forth until you get a job or you have the ability to go back to work. So it seems like something that shouldn't be allowed, right? But it is, and it is very flexible. And that's what is so beautiful about a line of credit. Now, some of you are sitting out there saying, yeah, Jen, but those lines of credit, man, the interest rates on them are so much higher than a loan. And you're right. And I hear it literally every day doing this business, right? I hear it every day where people are like, oh my gosh, why would I take a line of credit? Because my loan is so much less. The interest rate is so much less. Now, those are people that haven't fully grasped yet velocity banking. And so let me explain a little more in detail. So when I get, when I get the statements here, but that line rate is higher than the loan I have, the answer is yes. And typically it is. But I'm here to tell you that in many cases, that doesn't matter. You could have a 7% loan and a 20% line of credit and still sometimes come out ahead than you would if you had, using the line of or the loan instead. So why this works is because of the paycheck parking, right? Because we're taking our income and we're using our income to help combat the interest charge, because we know that lines of credit are configured or calculated, I should say, on an average daily balance. Okay, so every day the banks are going in there and they're looking at what your average daily balance is, and they're calculating their interest off of that for that statement period. All right. And so when we make chunk deposits to that line of credit, such as our income into it, then it immediately drops that balance. So then our average daily balance is then much lower than it would be, had we done it another way. So some of you are out there but saying, you know what, that's all well and good, but why wouldn't I just make extra loan payments? Well, you can. That is something that you certainly can do. But here's what I have found and what I have experienced in my own life, right? When you have a little bit of extra cash flow, what do you do with it? What do you do with it? I know what you do with it because you did what I did with it, right? You spend it somewhere, and you might not have a choice. You might not have a choice because stuff comes up, right? And so maybe you have an extra payment for, a tournament or something that one of your kids goes to, or maybe you have a dentist bill that you weren't expecting, or a doctor bill, or maybe you had repairs on your car that you weren't expecting, right? So it seems like something comes up every month, and guess what? People hardly make extra payments. And not only that, when you do make those extra loan payments, you have to specify that that is going to be a principal payment. Okay, so if you're doing it every month, then you have to go in, you have to specify principal only, blah, 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 so that they don't tack it onto your interest, because that is what they do if you do not specify where you want that extra payment money to go. So why I like the lines of credit and putting your money into the line of credit like that is because it is done for you. All right, it's already done. The money goes in, it already takes care of business for you. So you don't have to worry about an extra step of putting money back on that line of credit. It's already done. And chances are you're probably not going to then use all of it. You're probably going to let it work your balance down. Now, some of you out there are different. Maybe you're spenders and you like to spend and you'll go out there and spend. Well, if you do, that's okay. Just know you're not going to pay it down quite as fast as you might like to. So you want to curtail some of that if you can, right? Just kind of common sense. All right, so let's make a comparison here. As much as we can as far as apples to apples are concerned, right? Because we're talking about two totally different loans. So I can't completely compare apples to apples. Number one, we know that loan interest rates are typically less, right? And a line is much higher. And so we can't compare apples to apples that way. But if we use the same payment, which is my example here, I'm going to use the same payment with different interests, and I'm going to show you what happens, okay? So in my example, we have an income of $5,300. That is what they get paid, $5,300. Their total expenses are $4,900, okay? Which leaves them with $400 in cash flow. All right, which is a decent cash flow, right? But we all know, again, stuff happens that can get eaten up, that can get, that can be gone in a month, that can happen. But you could also save it. Maybe that's what you choose to do. When you have cash flow, that's great. But when you have debt, let's take a look at getting out of that debt first and then deal with what we're going to do with all of that cash flow that you're going to have once you're out of debt. So in this case, we have a personal loan and it's for $13,000. And sorry, forgot my comma here. Dan would get so upset. All right, so it's at $13,000 and the payment is $311. And this personal loan is at 7%, which is pretty much the going rate right now is 7%. And so it's at 7%, and this is 48 months, right? So it's a 4-year loan, which means, yes, 4-year loan. And then we have 1942 is how much in interest we would pay, right? How much we would pay if we let it run to term, okay? Not making any extra payments, okay? That being said, here is our personal line of credit. All right, so now we have a line of credit here, and it also has a payment of $311. and its interest rate is considerably higher than the 7%. It's just about double, right? So it's just about double that rate. And if we were to let this term out, which in this case is 4 years and 8 months, so a little bit longer, right? It would cost us $4,405. Doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like much of a deal here, does it? Right? So right now you're still going, you know what, Jen, I'll take the loan. Thank you very much. Right? So that's what you're saying. And I get it, because I would have thought that too. At one point, I did think that until now, right? Okay. So now I'm going to show you the velocity banking way, the pay down strategy. Remember? Organize your bills. Number one, organize. Get them all laid out, figure out what you have coming in and what you have going out. Then we're going to identify that debt destroyer. In this case, it's going to be a line of credit. That's going to be our debt destroyer. Debt destroyers are always a line of credit, never ever a loan. Okay, so your debt destroyer is a line of credit. And of course it has to be, right? Because loans are closed end, right? So they're closed. You can't get the money back out. Once it's in there, it's in. You can't get it out. Lines of credit are open. You can take money out. All right. So we got a line of credit here. That's what we're using. That is our debt destroyer. So that is step 2, which is identify. The last stage is step 3, and that is implement. Okay. I should also mention in step 2, along with picking your debt weapon, your debt destroyer, you also need to pick your strategy. So you're identifying both your debt destroyer and the strategy you're going to use. Here we're using a simple strategy. It's just paying down and getting rid of this money that's on this loan or line of credit. All right, and the third step is implementing. It is hammering out your plan and getting it done, okay? So here we've taken the line of credit, okay? So we've said, okay, we're gonna try this line of credit thing. We're gonna try this thing Jen says that, is gonna help everybody out, this line of credit, doing velocity banking, the pay down way. We're gonna try this. All right, so you do. And here's what happens. You have a $13,000 balance on this line of credit. So here's your first month here, okay? You're going to put your income on that, okay? And so that's illustrated over here, $13,000, and our income, which is $5,300. All of that is going on this line of credit. Now, why is all of it going on the line of credit? Those of you that have been watching some videos and may not totally understand this, let me just explain here. A line of credit, you can put every penny you have into it, because you can then pay your car loan through it. You can pay your mortgage through it. You can pay any other loans or credit cards that you have through a line of credit. Because if you have a credit card and you're using the credit card as your debt destroyer, you cannot pay a credit card with a credit card. You cannot pay a loan with a credit card. You cannot pay your mortgage with a credit card, right? Or auto loan, whatever. You can't pay a loan with it. So in those cases, you have to hold that out, those payments out of your income and expenses, okay? So those have to be held out, because you have to pay them through your checking account. You can't pay them through the card. But this strategy will still work doing that. And in this case, it is a line of credit. We're using a personal line of credit. So that means all of your deposit can go into the line of credit. And then you are going to write checks or do debits out of your checking account, or auto pay is going to come into your checking account and pay as normal. And then it's going to pull from that line of credit to cover those charges, okay? And so most of the time, I should say, you can get a line of credit to work this way, connected to your checking account, where it automatically pulls from that line. Now, only do that if your bank is offering it for you fee-free. If they're going to charge you to move that money, then you don't. You're going to manually move it. Not a big deal though, right? You're just going to pull money as needed, put it in your checking account. Your bills are all going to get paid. You're going to do your debits. You're going to go on living life the way you always do, okay? So that's how you handle that. All right, so we've got $5,300 comes in as your direct deposit. You place it right on the line, or in a sense, you're making a payment to the line of credit, right? And so that immediately drops your balance to $7,700. So now we have to calculate then what our interest is going to be, okay? And so our interest then is going to be $112, okay? And I'll get to that calculation in just a minute. But we also have expenses, right? All of our expenses are coming through this line of credit, all right? And so you can see the difference here. I have $45.89 here, but I said my expenses over here were $4,900, okay? So what's going on with that? Well, when you pay your expenses this way, okay, and you pay it through that line of credit, that direct deposit that comes in satisfies this payment right here, okay? So you no longer have to make that payment. The only thing you're taking care of then on that line of credit is the interest. You always have to pay that interest amount. And so that interest amount in this case is $112, all right? So the remainder comes back to us as cash flow, okay? So that comes back as cash flow. And we do that by reducing our expenses by that dollar amount. All right, so how do we then calculate the interest? All right, well, it's pretty simple. All you're going to do, now remember, this is a 13% interest rate. So we are going to take our 13,000, okay? So we take our 13,000, we're going to add it to our low balance, the 7,700, okay? And we're going to get an average. That average then is then multiplied by this 0.13, all right? That will give you a year's worth of interest for that line of credit. We don't want that year though, right? We just want 1 month of it. So we have to divide it then by 12. And that's where I'm getting the 112 from, okay? All right, so as you can see, I'm moving through this month by month by month. And each month my direct deposit comes in. I have a high balance, I have a low balance. I have my expenses come out and my interest that comes back. Well, I guess technically it comes back in, right? So I guess technically it comes back in. So the interest comes in, the expenses come back in, and it brings our balance up to 11,795, but we started at 13,000. So already in 2 months, we've dropped our balances significantly, all right? And as you can see, that interest is coming down. So what does that mean if you were to look at this pictorially? So what's that visual, right? I'm a very visual person, and for me, I like to see it this way. This was the clincher for me. When I saw this in doing velocity banking, right? And it's funny because Dan actually graphed it out for me. And so, you know, I understood the concept, but it really got hammered home by seeing the pictorial view of it. And so, that was awesome, right? So I like to do this now and then for you guys to let you really see how it works. So here is your 13,000, okay? This is what you start out with. And then you make your direct deposit and it drops your balance immediately to 7,700, which means you've paid 112 in interest. Next month, you then start out with 12,401. You make your direct deposit payment comes in and you drop your balance to 7,101, and you've paid 105 in interest. And then the next month, month 3, 11,795 is what you start with. And you make your direct deposit, and then you're left with a balance of $64.95, and you've paid $99 in interest. Then month 4, 11,183 is where you start with, and then you make your direct deposit, drops your balance to $5,883, right? So you can see it's dropping the balance as you go along, all right? And then your interest that you've paid that month is $92. So again, then your expenses come out, your expenses come in, your interest comes in, right? And so then you're back up to $10,564. But then your direct deposit hits, right? And it drops you to $5,264. And you've paid $85 in interest. So you can see how this is stepping down as you go, just as your overall amount is stepping down as you go, just as your low balance, right, continues to step down as you go. So this is a great view because I think it makes so much sense when you look at it this way and you realize what these numbers actually look like. And so that's why I like to show it to you. Now, we started, remember, this is what we were going to pay with our loan, all right? And if we let our line of credit work out and continue to run, and if we made our payments to it, it would take us 4 years and 8 months, and we would spend $4,405. So I get it when you guys say, there's no way I'm going to take a line of credit at a 13% interest rate over that 7% until you enter in velocity banking and running your finances different. Because remember, it's all about a strategy. It's all about learning to bank a different way. You guys have all been taught, just as I was taught, how to bank, and it is traditional banking. I was a banker, right? I was a banker. I was a branch manager. I watched my bankers, teach people every day. They taught them traditional banking, and guess what? They always went for the loan over that line of credit, unless there were other circumstances where somebody needed money, would have money coming in and money going out, and they needed that flexibility, okay? Lots of times business owners we talk to about lines of credit, but much less homeowners, right? or individuals, unless they had certain circumstances where they might need a little bit more money and they didn't want to use a credit card to do it. We might then talk about a personal line. Now I talk about personal lines all day long because they make so much sense. Now, don't get mad at your banker. They don't know, right? They really don't know. And they're also paid a commission. And that commission is much higher for a loan versus a line. And so, they are sometimes looking out for themselves, but at the end of the day, they're great people and they're looking out for you too. They just don't know a different way, right? They don't know. And so they're trying to give you the best interest rate and the best payback, because even the bankers looking at this, they're going to say, oh, well, this amount is way less that you would owe than this amount. And they're right, it is, until you use Velocity Banking. All right, so what does it look like? So now if we finish our rundown, right? And so I want to just show you, I didn't carry these numbers all the way through, but I did your graph here. So if we take and we look at this, what does it look like? All right, so running it the Velocity Banking way, $13,000 would cost this person $925 in interest, and they would do it in a little over 1 year, 1 year and 1 month. That's pretty powerful if you ask me. I would much rather spend $925 in interest than $1,942, okay? And so using that line of credit the right way, using the tools at the bank the right way are what will get you guys out of debt. So keep watching, keep learning, and you guys, by all means, contact us. If you need some help, I am answering questions all the time with email, and I'm also answering questions that crop up on the YouTube comments. I appreciate you guys so much for that. It's fun for me. This is, I know, like I'm lame, right? This is fun for me, but it actually is. So I love hearing from you guys, and I love hearing how Velocity Banking has changed your world just like it's changed mine. So if you like what we're doing, I just ask that you like and subscribe so we can get this content out to more people, so more people can learn the Velocity Banking way and save themselves a whole lot of headache and a whole lot of heartache. Have an awesome day, guys, and I will see you next time.